when stillness becomes explosive potential. This photograph captures Bruce Lee in a position most martial artists avoid, extremely low, weight distributed precariously, seemingly vulnerable. Yet there's nothing vulnerable about this image. Lee's body is coiled like a spring compressed to its limit, every muscle fiber visible and tensed, ready to explode in any direction. His gaze is directed downward and forward, tracking something or someone with predatory focus. The dramatic backlighting creates a silhouette effect that emphasizes his lean physique while casting much of his body in shadow, adding an almost supernatural quality to the image. Behind him, traditional architectural elements, screens with geometric patterns, frame the scene in what appears to be a classic Asian setting. This isn't a standard fighting stance from any traditional martial art. This is Bruce Lee improvising, adapting, using his body in ways that textbooks never taught. The art of the low position. In traditional martial arts, low stances serve specific purposes. They lower your center of gravity for stability, they exercise leg strength, and they teach patience and endurance. But Bruce Lee's crouch in this photograph transcends traditional application. Notice how his weight appears distributed primarily on his left leg, bent deeply at the knee, while his right leg extends outward for balance and potential striking. This position requires extraordinary strength in the quadriceps, hip flexors, and core muscles. Holding this pose for even 30 seconds would leave most people shaking with fatigue. Lee could maintain such positions indefinitely because of his legendary leg strength, developed through countless hours of kicking drills, stance training, and his famous weighted leg raises. The low position also serves tactical purposes. It presents a smaller target to opponents, changes the angle of attack dramatically, and allows for explosive upward strikes or sweeps that opponents don't anticipate. In his Jeet Kune Do system, Lee emphasized that fighting isn't about looking good in fixed positions, but about flowing between positions based on circumstance. The shadow play, lighting as character, the dramatic backlighting in this photograph transforms Bruce Lee from human to icon. High-contrast black-and-white photography was standard in Hong Kong cinema of the 1970s, partly for budgetary reasons and partly for aesthetic effect. But this particular lighting setup, what photographers call rim lighting or edge lighting, was carefully chosen to emphasize Lee's physical condition. Light traces the outline of his muscles, creating a three-dimensional effect that makes his body appear to leap off the flat photograph. The shadows obscuring parts of his face and torso add mystery and intensity. This lighting technique would become standard in martial arts and action photography precisely because of images like this. It makes fighters look more dangerous, more powerful, more mythical. The contrast between light and shadow also echoes Taoist philosophy that Lee studied extensively: yin and yang, soft and hard, stillness and motion existing simultaneously in perfect balance. Legs that launched a legend. Bruce Lee's leg development, partially visible in this photograph, was extraordinary, even by modern athletic standards. His thighs were disproportionately large compared to his upper body, a result of his emphasis on kicking as the primary offensive weapon in Jeet Kune Do. Lee believed that legs were longer and stronger than arms, making kicks more effective than punches for both range and power. His training included thousands of repetitions of various kicks daily: front kicks, side kicks, hook kicks, spinning kicks, and his devastating signature move, the side kick. But he didn't just practice technique, he trained legs like a powerlifter trains for squats. Weighted kicks, resistance training, plyometric exercises, and flexibility work all contributed to legs that could reportedly kick with over 1,000 pounds of force. The deep crouch captured in this photograph requires the kind of leg strength that athletes spend years developing. For Lee, this was just another position in his movement vocabulary: the hunter's gaze. Look at Bruce Lee's eyes in this photograph. Even partially shadowed, you can sense the intensity of his focus. He's not looking at the camera, he's looking at something or someone else, tracking movement, calculating distance and timing. This gaze reflects what Lee called awareness without fixation, seeing everything without staring at anything specific. In his writings, he discussed the concept of soft eyes, borrowed from various martial traditions, Keep your gaze relaxed and peripheral vision active so you can detect movement from any direction. The downward angle of his gaze in this photo suggests he's tracking an opponent's feet or lower body, a tactical choice, since many fighters telegraph their intentions through subtle weight shifts and foot positioning before they strike. Lee trained his observational skills as rigorously as his physical techniques, studying film of his fights and others, analyzing what worked and what didn't, constantly refining his understanding of combat dynamics, the architecture of combat. The setting visible behind Bruce Lee in this photograph, screens with geometric lattice patterns, traditional Asian architectural elements, places this image firmly in the context of his Hong Kong film career. These sets appeared in multiple Golden Harvest productions, often representing dojos, temples, or wealthy residences. The geometric patterns create visual interest and depth while not distracting from the main subject. There's also symbolic resonance. The rigid, ordered patterns of the screens contrast with Lee's fluid, organic positioning, traditional versus innovative, structure versus spontaneity, the old ways versus the new path, all embodied in a single frame. Film sets like these became iconic locations in martial arts cinema, replicated and referenced in countless films that followed. They represented spaces where the ordinary rules of society were suspended, where conflicts were resolved through skill and honor rather than law and bureaucracy. Jeet Kune Do in motion, the philosophy of adaptation. This photograph embodies a core Jeet Kune Do principle. There is no fixed position, only transition. Traditional martial arts often emphasize mastering specific stances, horse stance, bow stance, cat stance, and drilling them until they become second nature. Lee rejected this approach as too limiting. He believed that real combat was chaotic and unpredictable, requiring constant adaptation rather than memorized responses. The position captured here isn't from any traditional kata or form, it's Lee responding to a specific circumstance, using his body in whatever way the situation demands. This reflects his famous water metaphor. Water takes the shape of whatever container holds it, flowing around obstacles rather than confronting them directly. The crouch in this photo might last a fraction of a second in actual combat, just one moment in a continuous flow of movement. But Lee trained himself to be effective from any position, any angle, any circumstance. True martial arts mastery meant having no weaknesses, no dead positions where you couldn't attack or defend. The price of perfection, training to failure. Holding the position Bruce Lee demonstrates in this photograph requires not just strength but mental toughness. The burning in the muscles, the fatigue, the voice in your head saying "stand up, this hurts," pushing through these sensations is where champions are made. Lee's training philosophy involved regularly pushing himself to complete failure, especially in leg training. He would perform weighted squats until his legs couldn't support him, kick drills until his hip flexors cramped, stance training until his thighs screamed for relief. This wasn't masochism, it was scientific understanding that muscles must be stressed beyond their current capacity to grow stronger. The lean, defined legs visible in this photograph weren't sculpted for aesthetics, but forged through painful, exhausting work. Lee documented this training in his journals, noting weights lifted, repetitions completed, personal bests achieved. He treated his body like an experiment, constantly testing variables and measuring results. The psychological edge, unpredictability as weapon. Imagine facing an opponent who suddenly drops into the position Lee demonstrates here. Your mental calculations break down. You were prepared for someone at normal fighting height, and suddenly they've changed the entire geometry of the encounter. Where do you strike? How do you maintain balance if you kick at such a low target? Is this a setup for a sweep or a tackle? The uncertainty creates hesitation, and in combat, hesitation is death. Lee understood that physical technique was only part of fighting. Psychology and strategy mattered just as much. By training positions and movements that opponents didn't expect, he gained advantages before physical contact even began. This reflects principles from The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which Lee studied carefully. All warfare is based on deception. The unpredictable fighter is more dangerous than the strong fighter, because you can't prepare for what you can't predict. Cinema is laboratory, film sets as testing grounds. This photograph likely dates from one of Lee's Golden Harvest films, possibly Fist of Fury or Way of the Dragon, where elaborate fight choreography pushed the boundaries of what audiences expected from action cinema. But for Lee, these weren't just movies. They were opportunities to test and demonstrate his martial arts philosophy to global audiences. Each fight scene was carefully choreographed, yet Lee insisted on modifying sequences that didn't reflect real combat principles. He would argue with directors and choreographers, demonstrating why certain moves were impractical or ineffective. Sometimes he would injure co-stars who couldn't keep up with his speed and intensity. The result was fight choreography that felt more visceral and authentic than anything cinema had seen before. Audiences responded because even without martial arts training, they could sense the difference between authentic technique and theatrical performance. The musculature of mastery. Even in shadow, Bruce Lee's physical development in this photograph is remarkable. His back muscles, latissimus dorsi, erector spinae, trapezius, create clear definition through his clothing. His arms, though not the focus of this image, show the rope-like muscle development characteristic of martial artists rather than bodybuilders, lean, functional, built for performance rather than appearance. His core engagement is evident in the way he maintains this difficult position. Without exceptional abdominal and oblique strength, his torso would collapse forward, or his lower back would round. Every visible muscle serves a purpose in the position he's maintaining. This functional physique resulted from training that prioritized movement quality and practical strength over mirror muscles. Lee's approach to physical development was decades ahead of contemporary fitness culture, anticipating modern concepts like functional training, mobility work, and sport-specific conditioning. The legacy of innovation. This photograph represents something larger than a single moment in a film or training session. It documents a revolution in how people thought about martial arts and human physical potential. Before Bruce Lee, martial arts in Western consciousness were mysterious, exotic, and largely misunderstood. After Lee, millions of people worldwide took up training, seeking to unlock their own potential. The positions, techniques, and training methods he demonstrated became standards that subsequent generations built upon. Mixed martial arts, parkour, functional fitness training, all owe debts to Lee's pioneering integration of multiple disciplines and his insistence on testing everything against practical application. This single photograph, showing Lee in an unorthodox position that no traditional style taught, embodies his philosophy: reject limitation, embrace adaptation, constantly evolve. Final reflection: the coiled spring. There's something profound about capturing Bruce Lee in this moment of compressed energy. He's not striking, not leaping, not demonstrating his legendary speed. He's simply crouched, waiting, ready. Yet the photograph radiates potential energy. You can almost feel the explosion that could happen in the next instant. This captures an essential truth about martial arts mastery. The most dangerous moment isn't when the master is moving, but when they're still, because that stillness contains infinite possibilities. Lee could spring forward, backward, or to either side. He could sweep, kick, or tackle. He could remain perfectly still, making his opponent commit first and then counter. The photograph freezes one instant, but suggests the 1,000 possibilities that could unfold from it. And perhaps that's the deepest lesson Bruce Lee taught. True mastery isn't about perfecting one technique, but about developing yourself so completely that you can respond effectively to anything. The crouch isn't a position, it's a promise of transformation, a moment before motion, potential about to become kinetic. And in that space between stillness and action, in that compressed moment of possibility, we see why Bruce Lee remains legendary 50 years after his death.